Slide 1. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariana Garcia, and I am here with Oscar Gonzalez. And on behalf of the ADA National Network and the Spanish Language Outreach Project, we are introducing a new series of videos that aim to inform the Spanish-speaking community about the rights and the Americans with Disabilities Act. This presentation includes the series' first topic, disability as a concept. We will discuss the idea of disability and some of the associated barriers in our community and introduce 3 case studies to help us understand these concepts across this series of videos. Slide number 2. A quick disclaimer, the content of this video does not necessarily represent the views of NIGLR or ACL, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. Slide number 3. So what are the objectives of this video? So there are 3 main points we want to cover in this video. First, we will review the concept of disability. Second, we will discuss the stigma associated with disability in our Latino community. And finally, we will review the case scenarios that will be present in all the video series. Slide number 4. So let's start with what is disability. So disability is a complex term existing in multiple forms. Disability can be discussed as a medical diagnosis, a social practice, or a legal term. So medically, disability focuses on various types of physical and or mental impairments, conditions, or differences between individuals. Socially, disability focuses on limitations presented against persons with disabilities from multiple social institutions, social interactions, or other social factors. And then finally, legally, disability is discussed regarding policies and laws related to benefits, access, and social support. We will review the definition of ADA in video 4. Also, at the end of this video, we will provide additional resources if you want to learn more about these topics or any other topic related to this video. Slide 5. So, why is it hard for our community to talk about disability? For many people in our community, it is hard to recognize that there is a disability in the family. It is also challenging to understand how disability is understood according to the law. One of the significant barriers when we approach the topic of disability is the negative belief about disability, commonly known as stigma. So in our culture, many factors make this conversation difficult. This might come from our cultural beliefs associated with religion or the concept that having a disability is shameful, a synonym of weakness, or that having a disability means a person is valueless. Some of the common phrases we hear include things like, this is not me, or we don't want to be associated with it, or yes, I have a medical condition, but of course I'm not disabled. So unfortunately, that stigma builds a barrier for our community. It keeps us from being able to talk about disability or even try to open a space for it in our lives or our families. So it also creates difficulty in accessing support and necessary information. It is also important to remember that we can acquire a disability at any point in our lives. So again, that is why it's essential to talk about disability and try to eliminate the stigma associated with it. Part of our role here is to keep learning about disability and approaching it differently than we are used to, and support those members in our community who still have difficulty with the topic, and might need some support. Slide 6. So let's talk a little bit about the different forms of disability. So disability happens in many forms and severities, and some of them might require different types of support. But not all the disabilities are the same, and some are more obvious than others. So, as we can see in this slide, to the left, we have visible disabilities. These are usually obvious and can include someone who uses an assistive mobility device, such as a walker or a wheelchair, someone with cerebral palsy, paralysis, or an amputation. And, for example, people who have like Down syndrome. Invisible disabilities, on the other hand, are often more complex to talk about because is they're not always obvious. So people with invisible disabilities often need to uncover their condition to receive support. So some examples of invisible disabilities are any mental health condition, diabetes, chronic diseases, autism, and cognitive or intellectual disabilities. And although these disabilities are not always obvious, they still have a way of limiting our daily activities. So, for some of you, this might be clear, but what we have found in our study is that many Latinos do not associate some health conditions such as diabetes, asthma, or mental health, among many others, with disabilities. However, under the ADA in the United States, they are included in the definition of disability, and we will expand on this on video 4. So it is essential to raise awareness so more people with these health conditions can advocate for their rights and access the correct support. So we are taking time in this video to talk about these different forms of disability and allowing our community to recognize that they might qualify for some support under the ADA. So now Oscar will talk a little bit more about the stigma of disability in our community and how we can address it.
Slide 7. Thank you, Mariana. So, what is the negative impact of stigma in our community? Stigma about disability is very common, and it has a negative impact on our community. Many people within the Latino community report stigma that is attached to disability, especially if it's related to mental health. People also report shame or fear due to disability. Stigma can make talking about disabilities hard, as well as create the wrong idea about people with disabilities. Consequently, many people do not consider some chronic health conditions or mental health conditions as a disability, which does not allow people to accept and access helpful services. Stereotypes also contribute to stigma about disability. Our culture has taught us, often incorrectly, certain attitudes, assumptions, and conclusions about people with disabilities, which leads to prejudice and biases. For example, one stereotype is seeing people with disabilities as victims. However, they want to be treated like everyone else and be appreciated for their strengths. Another example is that people within the Latino community and society in general often view mental health conditions as a sign of personal weakness or character flaws. This wrongly implies that individuals are to blame for their mental health condition. The best way to combat these tendencies is to see every person as an individual. Slide number 8. And we're going to talk about the impact of language. In addition to stigma attached to disability, language can have a significant impact on people within the community, sometimes preventing people from talking about or associating with a disability. Years ago, some of the offensive language was normalized in our community. Now, some of these words are used to describe people with disabilities. However, these words are outdated and inaccurate, and most of them dehumanize our members of the community with disabilities. Therefore, it is essential to be aware of the language we are using to refer to people with disabilities and change some of those words. On the right side of this slide, we can see some of the terms that we should not say anymore and some that need to be avoided. You should avoid derogatory and outdated terms, which are often in terms of mental health, such as schizo, crazy, or psycho. These are not appropriate and underplay the impact of mental illness. Other outdated and harmful terms include crippled, handicapped, or retarded. Please remove these terms from your vocabulary. You can also check our fact sheets from the ADA National Network to learn more about this and be a better community member, starting with the language we use to approach people with disabilities. Slide number 9. And so we continue on with the importance of talking about disability. Talking about disability can be hard for our community, and it has its challenges. That is why it's so important to talk about it. First, one may do this to get support, whether informal support from family and friends or formal support services from organizations or one's workplace. Another reason may be to promote one's disability identity, including building community and broader understanding of disability. Third, someone may disclose a disability to protect their rights as a person with disability. Similarly, one may talk about disability at the workplace to request accommodations or modifications depending on the case and the need. This will be discussed in a video 4 in more detail. Slide number 10. And so there are some considerations when talking to someone about with a disability. After reviewing some of the negative consequences of stigma about people with disabilities, some people avoid socializing with people with disabilities because they do not know how to approach them without saying something inappropriate. It is always important to understand that people with disabilities want people to treat them as an individual and a human being. Remember always to emphasize abilities and avoid derogatory language. Overall, it is important to focus on individuality when addressing disability. Have patience when in doubt, ask, and don't assume, and treat all with dignity and respect. Slide 11. So throughout this video series, we will follow 3 cases based on questions regional centers have received that will help the audience understand the different aspect of people with disabilities. These cases will address across the different topics of the series. And so we have Lucia, Martha, and Lucas, and we will talk more about them. Slide number 12, Martha. Martha is a 30-year-old woman who came from El Salvador at the age of 15 and is undocumented. She has type 2 diabetes and anxiety. Diabetes is an invisible disability as well as anxiety, which is also part of the spectrum of mental health conditions. Diabetes is still a disability, even if a person is healthy and diabetes is well managed. It is still covered by the ADA. People with diabetes of all types are protected as people with qualifying disabilities. The Center for Disease Control states that Latinos have more than 50% chance of developing type 2 diabetes at a younger age. Hispanics also have a higher rate of kidney failure and diabetes-related vision loss. Anxiety is an invisible disability as well as and is considered a mental health condition that can interfere with daily activities and last for a very long time. Research shows that overall mental health issues are on the rise for Latinos between the ages of 12 and 49. In 2018, 2 in every 9 Hispanic adults had a serious mental illness. Martha has been fired multiple times because she has panic attacks and she has a service dog. So that is the current situation, and we're going to be discussing this a little bit more in future slides. And now Mariana will tell us about the next case study.
Slide 13. So let's look at Lucia. Lucia is our second case. Lucia is a 40-year-old woman whose family migrated from Peru to the United States 20 years ago. She recently sustained a traumatic brain injury after a car accident. Traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs, have different levels and severities. However, TBIs can cause residual symptoms that can cause a permanent disability. TBIs are mostly an invisible disability, and it can include physical, cognitive, or sensitive difficulties. So Lucia works at a medium-sized company, and she has trouble focusing on a specific job functions. In her free time, she likes to go to concerts and events. However, lately, she has had problems finding accessible spots at the events she likes to go. So we'll continue talking about Lucia in the next videos, and Oscar will talk about the last case for this series.
Slide 14. Thank you, Marian. Now we're going to talk about Lucas. Lastly, Lucas is an 18-year-old young adult who has autism. His family migrated from Mexico 10 years ago. They are undocumented, and so autism is a neurodevelopmental disability, and it is also an invisible disability. Lucas, in this situation, is not allowed to participate in soccer practices at the public park programs in his neighborhood. And now Mariana will discuss a little bit more about what your role in the community is.
Slide 15. So, what is your role in the community in relation to disability, stigma, and language? So, one important aspect of this video series is to help the audience understand their role in the community in relation to people with disabilities and how each of us can have a positive impact on the life of those with disabilities, especially regarding rights. So people may have more than one role in the community. That means a person may have different legal rights and responsibilities. In this video series, we will break down these roles based on the topic we review, and we will encourage the audience to reflect on those roles and how they can improve their input to the Latino community with disabilities. So the question is, after reviewing the topic of this first video, disability, language, and stigma, what is your responsibility in the community based on your role? So on this slide, we make some recommendations of what can apply to community members regarding disabilities. Based on research evidence and community members' testimonies, small actions can make a difference in the community. So for example, employers can promote a safe environment for employees with disabilities, especially invisible disabilities, by educating staff and coworkers about the stereotypes that exist about disability and changing the narrative to a more inclusive one. For family members in our community, disability can be and still is a difficult topic due to the stereotypes and stigma. Therefore, reflecting on those and trying to communicate with other family members about why that has a negative impact on their members with disabilities. Even if you have children without disabilities, it is important to promote a more inclusive education. Service providers and professionals can also carry some of those stereotypes around, and it is important to make a change. Therefore, increasing disability awareness training and promoting inclusion at the local level and the community they work for can create a big difference. It is also important to update the resources and documents related to disabilities. And then finally, community members are also encouraged to promote disability in a positive way that moves away from the stereotypes. This can start by reflecting and educating about disability, how we approach it, and making positive changes towards inclusion in the communities and the groups they serve. Overall, we invite every community member to reflect on how they see disability, what they understand by disability, how they approach people with disability, and how they can make a positive change in their community to benefit our community of people with disabilities. So this closes this video, and then Oscar will give us some final resources and information about the next video.
Slide 16. And so as we ended this video, we ask you to provide a brief feedback if possible on this video and its content. Your comments will assist us in improving video content to make it more useful for community members. You can scan this QR code and or visit the following link. And for more resources on the ADA National Network, including the work that has been done with the Spanish Language Outreach Project, you can visit adata.org/SLO. And if you would like to learn more about the resources we used in this video, you can access any of the following informational videos and papers. And so what's next? In video series part 2, the next video in this series will cover some of the barriers that the Spanish-speaking community faces when accessing information, including information about the ADA. And we'll see you soon.